Welcome to the Natural Way of Being video blog. This video is titled X Factor. The Grateful Dead, when describing some of their shows, would talk about this thing called an X Factor. And they talked about it was this kind of intangible element that would happen, at some of their shows that would like take a normal performance and kind of take it to a higher level. And they talked about it as it seemed to happen when the band became one with the audience and they kind of got in the same state of mind or the same consciousness, I guess you could say. And yes, I personally did experience the Grateful Dead's X Factor, and I also experienced it without drugs, just to note that. So I also noticed that this would happen when I was working with my teacher back 35 years ago, and ever since, we would do these ceremonies or workshops or even individual sessions. And sometimes there would be this kind of magic or X factors, and other times there were not. And then I also, recognized it when I'd go to Adyashanti retreats. And then when I started teaching and doing, personal sessions, individual sessions, and workshops and retreats and ceremonies, I noticed that sometimes it would be there and sometimes it would not. And there's a real tendency, of course, to really attach, because when it happens, it's this really expansive, like meaningful experience that everyone would be like, wow, that was so cool, and so then there's a real tendency to think when it's not there that something's off, and so I really started becoming conscious of this like last December when I started doing sharing circles. And because it started happening more, and some circles would have this really cool X factor or magic, if you will, and it would just be like amazing, and everyone would be, that was such a cool session. And then others were really cool, and we got some great work done, but it didn't have that expansive feeling that went with it, that X factor. And so, me being kind of the perfectionist that I am, I figured, well, I've got to figure out how to nail these sharing circles so there's X factor every time, so people can have these. They're paying me for these experiences, and I really want them to have this amazing experience every time. And of course, what I found was that I couldn't make it happen. And no matter what I did, I would do ceremony before and get all ready and do all these different things. And it seemed to be, sometimes it happened and sometimes it didn't. Then I thought back, and I thought back with my teacher, and sometimes it was there and sometimes it wasn't. He was like this enlightened guy. And then Adyashanti too, I'd go to his retreats, and sometimes it was there and sometimes it wasn't. And even with the Grateful Dead, it wasn't always there. That's why it came to be known, because sometimes it was there and sometimes it wasn't. It was these great shows, and then other shows were really good, etc. And so I just, came to realize is that we can create the conditions for the magic, for the X factor, but we really can't make it happen. It kind of happens when it happens. It's almost like this grace that happens from the other side, from spirit or some X factor, which means we can't describe it. The conditions just line up just right and become synchronistic in a way that this magic just sorts of seems to happen. So once you've experienced the X factor, and I'm assuming that all of you have experienced it in one form or another, either at a concert or out in nature or during a meditation or doing a workshop or a ceremony, and it just feels like this, wow, this expansive space. Once you've experienced it, there's this tendency to undervalue experiences when you don't experience it. If you experience it during meditation and then you have a meditation that it isn't there, you're like, oh, I mustn't have been meditating right because I didn't feel the magic, And I think this is not necessarily so, but there's this naturally thing that we want to experience it every time. And so I realized this one time I did a session with a client, and there was very definite not the X factor at this session. In fact, I got a real strong sense that the client was not real happy with me, you know, and I had pointed out some things that, you know, that perhaps he didn't want to see, he didn't want to look at. And anyway, so I kind of thought the session was a dud, you know, and I felt kind of bad. I'm like, sorry, man, you know, I did the best I could. I kind of went with what came to me, and so so I just kind of let it go, and I didn't give him his money back or anything, but I just figured, okay, well, that wasn't one of my best efforts. And sure enough, the next time that we met, he said, oh my gosh, like 2 or 3 days after we had that session, it just is like, I realized like what we were talking about during the session. And I saw it, and I saw like how I did that, and I had this huge like epiphany and this transformation. He goes, that was like one of the best sessions that like we ever did. And I was just like, okay, no X factor and really good session. Well, that's interesting. You know, and then I thought back, you know, at some of the other powerful sessions that I did, and beautiful sessions, and I'm evaluating them based on the client saying that they were really transformative in some way. And, you know, some of them had X factor or magic, and some of them didn't. So the actual benefit or value of the session seemed to be somewhat, you know, independent of whether there was magic or X factor there. And so my suggestion and kind of the takeaway from all this is, you know, don't undervalue an experience because there wasn't magic. There wasn't bells and whistles, and there wasn't like the X factor or this like really, you know, expansive, wonderful feeling. You know, sometimes, you know, the most normal, or even, dare I say, boring experiences can be really valuable. About a month ago, I was at an Adyashanti gathering, and there were other Adya, he goes by, other Adya students there, you know, and one of the students said, you know, oh, don't even bother watching the last video of the talk he did. It's not very good. You know, and I translated that as like, okay, well, there wasn't X factor there, is why it wasn't good. And so I figured, well, the hell with it. I'm watching this vid, and it was amazing. And I look back, and it's like, gosh, how arrogant, you know, that his students, you know, are like evaluating, like this was a good talk and this wasn't. It took me back to the Grateful Dead days. It's like, oh, this show was amazing and this show was all right, you know. And it's just like, it's a little arrogant to like evaluate our teachers' teachings based on like whether they like we thought they were awesome or not, you know. So I'm just saying. So it's just like, but that's what the mind does, right? It's like if it has an expansive experience, it attaches to it. If it doesn't, it's like it tends to undervalue it or discount it. So in closing, you know, my suggestion is enjoy the magic and the X factor, or the peak experiences they've also been called, or this expansive like amazingness of these experiences. Like enjoy them when they come, but please don't, you know, undervalue or discount experiences where it's not present, you know, because some of those ordinary or even boring experiences may be the perfect experience that you need to experience at that time. So enjoy them too. And so that's my video blog for this week. Thank you for watching. So I wish you a week where you enjoy all the experiences, from the most magical to the most boring and everything in between. And I'll see you in a week.